exuberant evening to one and all present here. As the day gently moves towards reflection, we now arrive at a session that invites us to look both outward and inward, into history and into consciousness itself. Welcome back to the SBI Rangdarshini Hall at the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. Our session is titled Sri Aurobindo, the Revolutionary, the Yogi. History often places people into neat categories, right? But there are rare lives that refuse any such divisions. Sri Aurobindo was one such life, a revolutionary who shook the foundations of colonial rule and a yogi who envisioned evolution of human consciousness itself. This session explores that extraordinary journey from resistance to realization, from freedom of the nation to freedom of the self. Can we welcome our speakers for this session, Narendra Murthy ji and Dr. Reema Ahuja ji on the dais with a huge round of applause. This evening's presentation will be delivered by a thinker who has spent decades engaging deeply in philosophy, religion, and spiritual inquiry. Mr. Murthy has devoted over 3 decades to study Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. He is the author of 6 profound books, including Eating His Money, An Odyssey of the Mind, The Religion of Wonder. Currently, he serves as a research associate at Sri Aurobindo Society and conducts workshops on yoga and spiritual seeking, making him uniquely placed to reflect on Sri Aurobindo's thought, clarity, and the lived understanding. Moderating this session, we have one of India's most respected voices with us, Dr. Reema Ahuja ma'am. She is an archaeologist, historian, a writer with a PhD from Cambridge University. She is the managing trustee of Jaipur Virasat Foundation, president of ICOMOS India, a fellow Royal Asiatic Society, and a former director of Maharaja Savai Man Singh II Museum, a City Palace, Jaipur. A founding member of the Society for Culture and Environment, she brings to this session rare ideas for history, culture, and civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is going to be amazing. It's going to have spiritual thought, historical perspectives, and it's going to really challenge us all to think, right? So please join me in giving our speakers a wonderful round of applause as they begin with this wonderful session.
Thank you for that warm welcome, everyone, and a welcome to you from our side for being here. And Narenji, I have a lot to learn from you, but I think we all have a lot to share. Sitting here, I was thinking when you were talking and giving the title again, that in a way it is the Navrasa of the moods of India that you see coming through in just the title also, that that anger. And from that you get to the Shanta stage. And that goes through most of us. But we have a long journey to get there. In the case of Sri Aurobindo, let's find out what his journey was. Because most of the time we either think of him, the categories part that our compere brought through so beautifully. He is the young revolutionary, hot young blood, ready to give his life, literally. And his brother Barin Bose, who was part of it. He's in this family culture of giving for the nation, of dying for the nation. But the other image that we have more often from schools mein ho, aap log colleges mein ho, ya kahin jate ho, we have that older face. That we don't have it displayed. Yes, let's start the PPT also, and sir will decide when he wants it. But you have the sage, पहुंचावा कोई. वो एक स्टेज है और हम लोगों के लिए it is very easy to say that he is someone special, but when we call someone special, we are already making that category that it is something that we cannot achieve. And I'm not saying we can or we cannot, but when we put someone at such a high pedestal कि हम यहीं से पैर छू रहे हैं और वो pedestal पे हैं, let us make that Mahapurush. Let us understand that Mahapurush a little more. I'm going to stop talking in a bit as soon as the slides come, but that is the image we associate. You can see his eyes. maybe there is a bit of the revolutionary still there. We'll know from Narendraji in a minute. But what is amazing is the few things that even you can get. आप किसी भी Google करोगे, आंटी Google से पूछोगे, अंकल Google से पूछोगे, तो his family, his maternal grandfather was an exceptional man in his own way, with ideas beyond his times. He's a Brahmo Samaji. In the case of Sri Aurobindo, when he was still Aurobindo Ghosh, right? A young man. But when he's born, 1872, and his older brothers are well known. One is eventually a very famous writer. Younger brother is equally well known, revolutionary. Ye bhi revolutionary. Younger brother gets sent off to Kalapani, Andamans. In 1915, he escapes from Kalapani. I think at that point they say he's one of the few, maybe forever he's been one of the few who actually made it out. And he's recaptured and sent. That is part of the genes. The family is sharing. The father, you'll talk about them, I hope. But the father is a doctor, a civil surgeon, and he's quite open to this whole, the culture that the British are bringing. He wants to explore it more. So the young Aurobindo, when he's still Aurobindo Ghosh, with his brothers and not the sister, gets sent away to England to study. And that's a young age. Again, 7. At the age of 7. And before that, they've gone to a boarding school in Darjeeling. Separated from the mother at a young age. And being while there, and they're all brilliant, it seems, that family. Even the mother, who seems to have some her own ideas about the world, was probably brilliant and could not express it in her way. While at Britain, he's not interested in some subjects, but he's got a great mind. And he studies lots of issues. I think some of the spray is not agreeing here. He learns lots of languages. We are still willing to fight over languages. Speak in this language if you are in this state. He's picking up Greek, and that also old Greek. So it's like, Sanskrit bolna or Hindi bolna ya Avdhi mein kuch seekhna. That's one part of it. But to learn a classical language that is not really in use, and to be fluent in it, at a very young age, he is fluent in about 20 languages.
Not 20, but
there's a big,
good
mastery.
6 to 7 languages.
And at this point, he still doesn't know his India well.
Yes.
Eventually, he comes to India. I'm going to stop there because I think by now you should be hooked onto the story of the man who probably was born already knowing certain things. We can't go into his mind. We can go into his mind through Narenji and Narenji's work. So, welcome, sir. This is the 6th of your books.
No, this has got nothing to do with any of my books. In fact, right now I'm writing a book on his greatest epic poem, Savitri. That is work in progress.
Other books?
Yes, other books I have written.
Would you just share a couple of titles? Let's see how much of a
actually,
man of many hats, sir, is.
Okay, I'll just first of all let me express my gratitude to BLF to organize a session on Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo has not got his due place in history. For whatever reasons, the way history has been written in this country, post-independence, people hardly know about him. They know only this much, that he was a revolutionary, a freedom fighter, and later on he became a yogi. Apart from that, people hardly know anything about his life. That's because, like I said, probably our education system, something is wrong with that it hardly speaks anything about one of the greatest sages and philosophers of the 20th century, acknowledged not only in India but all over the world. So that is, I'm really grateful to BLF and especially to Raghav Chandraji to organize a session on Sri Aurobindo and for inviting me to speak on Sri Aurobindo, which is a huge honor for me. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude.
We have members who would convey that.
And before I speak about he's my guru. Before I speak about him, like she said, to speak a little about my own writings, I have 6 published books, which is very popular with the younger generation. I'm very happy to see young faces here. And my books are very popular with an age group who are less than 30. And I have regular, correspondence with them. They read and they ask me questions and all that. My first book is called Eating His Money. All my books are available on Amazon. And I have a website, www.narendramurthy.com. So if you just go to my website, you'll get all the details of my books. The first book is Eating His Money. Basically, it's a funny story of Mullah Nasruddin. That book actually contains 35 jokes of Nasruddin, where I have written commentaries on the jokes, because those jokes are actually Sufi teaching stories. So I came to know about that when I was studying Sufism. So my first book is about that. My second book is a collection of essays on different subjects: sociology, political philosophy, psychology, different varied subjects, technology. So that's my second book. My third book is called The Religion of Wonder. That kind of tries to arrive at a religion without keeping the known symbols of religion outside the ambit, like temples and the organized religion, whatever we know. We try to, define a God who is outside all this, whether we can develop a soul connection with that force, supreme force. It's that, the third book. The fourth book is my book on Zen tradition, where I have written commentaries on 30 Zen stories. My fifth book is a work of historical fiction, where I set up 6 famous martyrs of history and conversations with them. Socrates, Jesus, Galileo, Joan of Arc, Gandhi and Mansoor. And the person who is having these conversations with them is Bertrand Russell, who is our voice, the voice of the modern skeptical man. So he's putting our questions to them and how they would have answered to the issues that we face today. So that
Thank you. I think we could go through sessions on those with great ease with you. But to come to your guru,
correct.
because your guru, when he returns to India, still in his early 20s, he gets a job at Baroda. He eventually is principal of what becomes the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University, Vadodara. That young age, and then he is discovering his Bengal. As we said in the beginning, he goes away from his own area at a very young age. And he's discovering Bengalis. He's also building his revolutionary...
And Sanskrit.
And he also was the vice principal of what is today the Jadavpur University. At a stage where most of us are thinking about career choices, he is letting, I don't know, the world, nature, something. What would you say, sir? What is guiding him at that young age?
Actually, I won't spend time on the, his life in England and all that. Let's just start from the point. At the age of 21, he returns from England with a thorough English education behind him. And he joins service under the Maharaja of Baroda. He's an employee of the Maharaja. And then he becomes a professor in Baroda University.
And he's given up joining the ICS for that.
Yes, that was in,
He's deliberately failed his horse riding exam. So that, he comes back. Sorry.
Then while in Baroda, his first political writings, he published them. There was one paper called Indu Prakash. And they were so kind of shocking and subversive that the editor was threatened that if you don't stop these articles, then we'll shut down your paper. So then he was requested, please don't write like this, write something about philosophy, political philosophy, and he lost interest. So for 13 years, he was, from 1893 to 1906, he was keeping quiet and he was doing his own sadhana, Sanskrit, Bengali learning and studying the scriptures. All those were happening in the Baroda days itself. Then comes the partition of Bengal in 1905, and that kind of, he takes the conscious plunge into politics. He leaves his job in Baroda and he comes to Calcutta. And at that point of time, this college was set up. Then it was called National College of Bengal, what is today known as the Jadavpur University. Nowadays it has acquired an ill repute. To think that Sri Aurobindo was the first principal of Jadavpur University. So he joins there, and what he does is, he starts writing a newspaper. He becomes the editor of a newspaper called Bande Mataram. That was the newspaper, And he was writing fiery articles in the newspaper about the British occupation of India. And can I see the second slide, please? Yeah. So in Bande Mataram, these are the ideas which we usually do not associate with him. He wrote about these ideas in Bande Mataram between 1906 and 1908. When Gandhi was nowhere in the scene, he spoke about Swadeshi. He spoke about national education, which we are still struggling to, give some shape to it, and complete boycott and non-cooperation. Don't we associate that this with Gandhi? But actually, this comes from Sri Aurobindo. He was the first one. And formation of a militant force. Of course, this was not in the paper. In the paper, he was advocating non-violent resistance against the government. But privately, he was guiding the armed revolutionaries. Because he was a person who always believed in armed rebellion. He did not believe in ahimsa. But this was a kind of political strategy. In his newspaper, he was talking about non-violent resistance to the government occupation. And complete independence, which we usually associate with Tilak, that I will have Swaraj. Swaraj is my birthright and all that. This idea, complete independence, this was also given voice by Sri Aurobindo for the first time in India, at a time when no one spoke about freedom. And here I'll tell you something. Congress was there, the party Congress was there, but their stand was staying within the domination and rule of Britishers. We would try to get some concessions. We would try to get something from them. Basically, Congress was a safety valve for the Britishers. Britishers encouraged the Congress. कि you air your grievances, हमें ये चाहिए, हमें वो चाहिए, थोड़ा बहुत दे देते हैं, like that. They never spoke about freedom or Swaraj or all this. So then these people, there were 4 of them, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal and Aurobindo Ghosh, as he was called then. These are the 4 people who you can say are the architects of India's freedom struggle. Our Indian freedom struggle started with these 4 people. And the huge intellectual, the foundation of that struggle, you can say the philosophy behind that struggle came from Sri Aurobindo, or Aurobindo Ghosh as he was called then. And then what happened is in 1907, that's a very famous incident, so I need to refer to that. There was a meeting of the Congress at Surat, where Congress split into 2 factions. One side saying, jaisa chal raha hai, waise hi chalega, and Britishers, we will keep on seeking concessions from the rulers, and for the betterment and for the upliftment of Indian society, we will not go into confrontation. They are ruling it well, how we won't be able to rule it in our own way. Although all that thing was going, and these 4 people, they this will not do. Swaraj is what we want. We want Purna Swaraj. So that there was a huge confrontation and shouting and quarreling and all that, and Congress split. So Congress named these people, these 4 people, extremists, and they called themselves moderates.
So the Ugravadi and the Narmavadi of history books.
Yes, but these people refer to themselves as the nationalists. We are not extremists. We are only for the nation. We are no extremists. So that is how that one important thing happened in the year 1907. And then his writings, because he was repeatedly writing on these subjects, and the public imagination and their consciousness was stirred by his writings. And he was writing in a language of the colonizer, and they had no answer to his, articles. So they were thinking of how to put him into jail. And then this thing happened. There was a bomb, that famous bomb, Alipur bomb conspiracy, which was carried out by Khudiram Bose and all that. And he... In Muzaffarpur it happened. They wanted to assassinate one judge who was giving very harsh treatment to the Indian freedom fighters. And like I said, Sri Aurobindo was guiding the armed revolutionaries behind the scene, secretly. He was the guiding force against all the revolutionaries. Anushilonis Shomiti, so they were, the armed revolutionaries. So they thought that, and Britishers knew about it, but they had no proof against him. So they Without any proof, they jailed him. When that bomb blast happened, they jailed him. And he was in the jail for 1 year. Can we see the next slides, please? So, before going to jail, he wrote a letter to his wife, where here we get an insight into his mind. I chose this to just to show you how his mind was working before that. He is writing to his wife, whatever virtue, talent, higher education and knowledge and wealth which God has given me belongs to him. Whatever I have, all my abilities, they belong to God. They do not belong to me. And see the way we conduct ourselves. Yeah, it's I. This is my talent, this is my, thing, creativity or whatever. Then next he says, if the divine is there, then there must be a way of experiencing his existence, of realizing his presence. So this was from the very early time, this was in his mind, that God has to be realized. It's not just a abstract idea to be left alone. And the third is what he felt about Mother India. I look upon the country as the mother. What would a son do when a demon sitting on the breast of his mother is drinking her blood? That is how he said, I am looking at my nation now. For me, the nation right now is like a mother, and a demon is sitting on her breast. So this is, you can say, and it gives an insight into his mind. The next slide, please. And this he wrote about Bharat Shakti, that we have to arouse the strength and Shakti in us. By the way, the department where I am working right now in Pondicherry, in Sri Aurobindo Society, it is called Bharat Shakti. You see in that slide, it's there. That department is Bharat Shakti. We work on the cultural renaissance of India. So he says, we are empty of strength, void of energy. We have abandoned Shakti and are therefore abandoned by Shakti. The mother is not in our hearts, in our brains, in our arms. And then he says, what is a nation? It is not a piece of earth, not a figure of speech, nor a fiction of the mind. It is a mighty Shakti. Come then, hearken to the call of the mother. She is already waiting to manifest herself, waiting to be worshipped. And today, don't you think this is happening? Somewhere we have become conscious of our own Shakti. And we see the Shakti of Bharat also. It is, coming up and expressing itself. India is now standing in a very, high place in the stage of the world. Because we have somewhere realized the strength of our nation, of ourselves. So this is what he's talking about, that we have to look at the country not as a geographical territory, but as a Shakti, and worship her like we worship Mother Durga or whoever. So that is one. Next. Next. Okay. Now here, no, please go to the previous slide. Back. Okay, doesn't matter. Now what happened is he was put into jail, and it was a 1 year imprisonment. Initially it was a solitary confinement, and during his imprisonment he had some major spiritual experiences. To put it simply, you can say he had experiences of God. He experienced the divine in the jail. And that brought about a huge transformation in his life. He was a totally different man after he came out of the jail. And he was not at all perturbed during his trial. He could be hanged. In such cases, all the prisoners were either hanged or they were sent to Andaman, Kalapani. But he was absolutely calm and unperturbed. And later on, when he was asked that, how could you be so calm when you could be hanged? He said, because I got the assurance nothing will happen to me. So it was like that. And this part is very inspiring. When his case was fought by Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, you must have heard about him. He came forward and he fought for Sri Aurobindo's acquittal. And in the last day, when C.R. Das was summing up the argument, this was what he said to the judge. The name of the judge was Beechcroft, and this is what C.R. Das said. My lord, if the pronouncement of freedom is a crime, Aurobindo Ghosh will admit his guilt. Therefore, my appeal to you, sir, is this, that a man like this who is being charged with the offenses imputed to him, stands not only before the bar of this court, but stands before the bar of the High Court of history for all time to come. The next slide, please. Your Honor, long after this controversy is hushed in silence, long after this agitation and turmoil have ceased, long after you and I are dead and gone, he will be looked upon as a poet of nationalism, a prophet of patriotism, and a lover of humanity. His words would be echoed and re-echoed not only in India, but across distant lands and seas. So this was actually the voice of God, not the voice of C.R. Das. That was a bhavishyavani he made, because nobody knew him.
C.R. Das did not know him before he came forward to defend him, and did not take any money. He was a well-known top lawyer who doesn't take any money to defend. And already the British were imputing the charge of the death penalty, otherwise transportation for life, on then Aurobindo Ghosh and the others with him. Right? But this happens.
So especially I find this very inspiring whenever I read it, the way C.R. Das, he spoke about this. Then he got released after 1 year. Next slide, please. Yeah. Then he started writing another newspaper, Karma Yogin in English and Dharma in Bengali. And he continued with what he was doing before he went to jail. And again, he was becoming very inconvenient for the British government, because he was speaking about things that nobody was speaking about. He was just speaking about you people have to leave Swaraj and all this. Lord Minto said in the year 1910, he is the most dangerous man in the whole of India. He was the viceroy at that point of time, Lord Minto. Why a dangerous man? A person is simply writing newspaper articles. Because he was shaping the thoughts of the people of the nation. Because he was bringing ideas into people's minds which were never thought about. They were kind of used to that yoke of slavery. So he was awakening them. But when Lord Minto said this, he's the most dangerous man in the world, things were happening behind the scene. And it was being anticipated that he would again be arrested under some pretext or the other. And he writes that one day he was sitting in the office of Karma Yogin and he heard a voice, go to Chandan Nagar. Chandan Nagar at that point of time was a French enclave. So immediately he just got up from his table and he went to Chandan Nagar. He stayed there in hiding for about 2 months.
Literally, he just...
Yes, he just got up and went. And the voice spoke to him with such an urgency. Go to Chandan Nagar. It was a firm Adesh, as he calls it. Then after staying 2 months in Chandan Nagar, he gets a further Adesh, go to Pondicherry. So that was 1910. He goes to Pondicherry, and as they say, the rest is history. And for the next 40 years, he is in Pondicherry, and the revolutionary, this was the revolutionary part, he becomes the yogi. And before we go to the yogi part...
Yes, no. I think we will go to the yogi part. We know that he's already having these spiritual experiences, which he might have partly shared through his writing, but we don't really know what's going on in his mind. In some case, could you say that, not in some case, but would you say that the ground has been prepared during whatever has come before? He's still relatively young. 1872 born. He's still not an old person who's nearing the search for...
Mid-30s.
Yeah. What has happened to him? Just the imprisonment, just the visions?
No, actually his yogic sadhana, if we call it yogic sadhana, that started in Baroda itself. When he was in Baroda, before he came to Calcutta, he was reading the Hindu scriptures, Gita, Upanishads, all those things he was reading. Those writings are still available.
From something you mentioned, he didn't actually have a formal guru teach him yoga. He learnt in less than 3 days?
Yes.
3 days?
Actually, it was not a guru in the formal sense. He was trying to work out a technique of meditation. And this Maharashtrian yogi was there called Lele, Vishnu Bhaskar Lele. He gave him a guidance in meditation, that you do this. I won't go into the details. And he said that particular technique...
And he just followed it
He just followed it. And he has written clearly in his writings, in 3 days, he experienced the silent mind, what is usually known as nirvana or transcending the mind. He said, I reached this state of absolute silence after following his method. But after that, he had no connection with Lele after that. So even he had this experience even before going to the jail. But in the jail, it was another experience. If you can say it was the cosmic consciousness. What he experienced in the jail was cosmic consciousness. We won't go into the technicalities of all that, different stages of yogic realizations. But that was the nirvanic experience before going to the jail. And in the jail, it was the cosmic consciousness. So,
And having got to Pondicherry,
again,
when does the ashram come about?
Yeah. Again, he takes his yoga further. Now he delves deep into yoga as soon as he goes to Pondicherry. And can I see the next slide, please?
While we are, is he at heart still the revolutionary, still the angry 30-year-old man, 30 plus?
No, the anger was in the sense he was still guiding people who were asking his guidance, but it was in the form of letters and all that. Because that was a kind of, he went into withdrawal, you can say, from active political life. He was approached by some people that you come back to politics, we don't have a proper leader. But he said, now my path is different.
So is he still Mr. Aurobindo Ghosh, or is he
No.
Shri?
After, this is where I'm coming. In the year 1914, he started writing a monthly journal called Arya. And this is why, this he gives the reason why he chose that name. This is what the meaning he has given. Arya Ari, with the various senses to toil, to fight, to climb or rise, to travel. Whoever then thus aspires, labors, battles, travels, ascends the hill of being, is the Aryan. He said Aryan is not a race, it is an inner quality. So we as Indians, we have to develop that Aryan quality. And Aryan quality is this: always aspiring, always laboring, always, self-improvement, climbing the hill of being, as he calls it. So here in Arya, all his major philosophical works, they are serialized in this monthly journal. The next slide, please.
And while we are on it, isn't 1914 the first time that the mother first came to India?
Yes.
Did they meet at that time?
Yes. In the year 1914, in fact, this monthly journal, the starting of it, happened because the mother came, and mother came along with her husband, Richard. So Richard, in fact, gave him this idea that you start a monthly journal and your ideas and your philosophy should go to the people. And Sri Aurobindo started writing on receiving that suggestion from Richard. But later on, Richard and the mother, they had to go back. First World War had started. They went to Europe. And he said that Richard, he pushed me into it and now he has gone. Now I am saddled with this, writing this whole thing on my own. But he kept writing. So that is how it came about. And these are the major works. And he has got 36 volumes of his complete works. No other enlightened person in the world has this volume of writing. Nobody. Even Swamiji, if you talk about his complete works, that's 9 volumes. Swami Vivekananda. So this is 36 volumes. Mammoth, volume of body of work.
You mentioned Swami Vivekanandaji. One comes back to India.
Yes.
One goes out of India. Is
That
there
was
a
the
link
same
happening?
year. Those are the strange coincidences of history, you can say. The year Sri Aurobindo returned to India, from England to India, that was the same year that Swamiji went from India to America. It was the same year. So, one took the message of Vedanta to the West, and one Westerner comes to India to give a huge boost to Vedanta and our philosophy in India itself. And later on, of course, it spreads to the whole world. So these are his major works. If I get the time, I'll speak about them a little bit. So these are his major works. So what was your question? That mother, ashram. The ashram, the mother and her husband, they went back to Europe. Her husband died. And mother was alone. And in the year 1920, she came to India permanently. And the ashram was set up in the year 1926. And in 1926, again Sri Aurobindo has a major realization, which we celebrate in Pondicherry as the Siddhi Day. That's another kind of special realization. And he goes into total seclusion. He used to meet people only 4 days a week, 4 days a year, and all the ashram and its activities was managed by the mother. So now mother comes to the forefront of the work. And the inner work was being done by Sri Aurobindo in his seclusion.
I think we could go on and on listening because you tell the real story in such a way that we are all engrossed. I know we have time is running out, but I think there will be people with questions.
In a little
So
bit,
let's-
I want to tell them about. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go on.
Yeah.
Next slide,
Next,
please,
next,
and we
next.
can have a hand ready. Okay. Next, please.
Next slide.
I think the slide is ticking, but get the
Yeah, yeah,
question
yeah.
ready also.
So,
Yes, here.
little bit about yoga. You people must have heard about Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga. These are the methods of reaching the divine, so to speak. Paths to God. So, like Bhakti Yoga is the path of emotion, where you direct your emotion Godward. And in Karma Yoga, you direct your dynamic energy and your work, ability to work and all that towards the divine. So he says, integral yoga, that is his contribution to yoga. He says that we have all these faculties in us, intellect, emotions, dynamic nature, they all have to be put to use. It cannot be an exclusive path of devotion or intellect. So that is why they all have to be combined. And they all have to be pursued simultaneously. So that is what integral yoga he talked about.
So I'm going to stop you there,
Yeah.
even though you have a slide.
Yeah.
Put the slide on. Let's open it for the questions because they will have to continue to discover for themselves
Yeah, please.
Sri Aurobindo after this. And I'm sure you're there to talk
Please.
with your book. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll give the mic back to sir. कुछ पूछेंगे? हाँ, हाँ. पहला सवाल आपका, फिर यहाँ पे कहीं.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rohit Singh. Presently, I'm posted in Finance Department as a Regional Secretary, and I'm an IAS officer. So, first 6 years of my schooling, I did from Sri Aurobindo Ashram. That's a school in Rewa district of Madhya Pradesh. And it's one way or the other associated with Pondicherry Ashram and Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi. During my IAS preparations, I see so many youngsters here, so that might be useful for them as well. During my IAS interview, I needed to put in extra effort to learn something or the other about Sri Aurobindo. And it became all the more important because the hobby that I had mentioned in my personality test was yoga and meditation. And it so happened that once we started talking about integral yoga, though the mic came to the audience. So we wanted to listen to you more on this topic. So my question is very simple. Sri Aurobindo, to the extent that I know, and I know very little about him, was such a great personality. And as you rightly pointed out, it was the same year when Swami Vivekananda came back to India and Sri Aurobindo went to Cambridge University. The question is, his writings, be it Life Divine, Synthesis of Yoga, whatever he writes, is quite different from what Swami Vivekananda himself wrote. About Swami Vivekananda's writing, it said that we don't need to consult any dictionary to understand what exactly he said. And it's exactly opposite for Sri Aurobindo. If you are having hard time sleeping, then the best pill is to read Life Divine. The question is, how to make Sri Aurobindo's teachings and writings accessible to the youth of India. And there happens to be a gap in understanding, in knowledge, in everything about what Sri Aurobindo talked about and what we understand or know about him. So if you could give some suggestions, some writings, some inputs into that. Thank you.
Excellent question. Excellent question. Let me tell you about my own experience in my life with reading Sri Aurobindo's works. I was always interested in studying religion and philosophy. Though I had my career in finance, which has got nothing to do with this, it was my passion in life. So I was reading all kinds of authors. Swamiji also I read. No difficulty in understanding. Then I picked up Sri Aurobindo somewhere in my, I think, early 30s. I could not follow anything. I just could not follow. I read a whole page, could make no sense of it. I gave up. Okay, I don't know what he's writing. Again, another 5-6 years later, again I gave it a second try. I could understand one or two passages. Again, beach mein samajh mein nahi aaya, like that. Again I gave up. In my third attempt, I started understanding his writing. His every sentence I started understanding. Sri Aurobindo's writings require a preparation. They require a preparation. And I'll tell you, if you are really interested in writing, in studying him, I'll tell you what to do and where to start. But before that, I think if you want to read his serious works, 3 qualifications are necessary, which doesn't apply to any other philosopher. It applies only to Sri Aurobindo. These qualifications are required. 3 qualifications. This I am speaking to you out of my own experience. Why did I succeed the third time and not the first and second? My own case. Now I am studying Sri Aurobindo for the last 22 years, continuously. The first qualification that is required is your mastery of the English language. You have to be really good in English. Moderate knowledge, chalta hai knowledge will not do. Your English has to be good to the extent that you don't have to open the dictionary every time to understand the meaning of a word. So first, mastery of English, that is required. First qualification. Second qualification, the ability to focus and concentrate for certain lengths of time. Say at least half an hour to 1 hour. You should be able to focus and concentrate and think of nothing else. Your mind should go nowhere. Only in that pages, your mind should remain stuck in those pages. That kind of focus and concentration you require because his sentences are long. His sentences sometimes run into 10, 12, 15, 16 lines, one sentence. So if you don't have that focus and concentration, you lose the thread of the logic. But the logic is perfect. If you have that focus, you will see from the first word to the last word, it makes perfect logical sense. It's wonderful. I mean, once you get a hang of his language, it's the greatest pleasure in life reading Sri Aurobindo. So that is required, focus and concentration for certain lengths of time. So you have to keep all your mobile phones switched off and all that, and only then touch a book by Sri Aurobindo. That is the second qualification. The third qualification is you would require a background study of our spiritual tradition. You need to have some basic idea of the gunas, of the Purusha, Prakriti, all these he talks about. He is assuming that you know them, and he uses those words, absolutely, very frequently and all that. So unless you know what those words mean, Prakriti or gunas, the rajas or tamas or whatever he is writing about, Hiranyagarbha, all those things. So some background study of spirituality you must have first. And I had that because I was already studying all my, the other traditions I was studying, other works, other people, works by other people. So I had that background prepared when I started understanding him.
So
these...
Sir, I don't want to rush you now, so what I'm going to suggest is, there is a book signing area just outside with the sofa and the more chairs. Please spend time, talk to Narendra Murthy ji, find out more, and I think we'll need to close because
just
of...
one thing I'll say, if you want to start Sri Aurobindo, start with letters on yoga. Those letters were written to his disciples to provide them guidance on their path. So those, the style and the way he has structured that, they are in like a conversation he's having. Even that is also high standard considering his style itself. But still, they are easy to follow. Letters on yoga is the place to start to read Sri Aurobindo.
So I think we've taken a journey all the way from the young man who is a revolutionary to the man who is maybe a mature, still a revolutionary. But along the way, he has become much more. Thank you for being here. I'm going to give you the last word, though I know it's time to hand over a short last word. Thank you before that.
It's a synthesis of all the other paths. And one revolutionary thing he said, which I cannot leave out, he said, man is a transitional being. our evolution is not complete. If we take the scientific view or the physiological view, we think that this is the end of the evolution, physical evolution. But he says, physical evolution is done, yes, but not psychological evolution or spiritual evolution. There has been evolution. There was matter. Initially, there was only matter, rocks and metals in the surface of the earth. Then came life. That was the next leap in evolution. Then came mind. Animals came, life came, then mind came, man. Initially, the ape men and all that, primates, and then Homo sapiens, and today what we are, modern scientific, rational, technological man. But he says, the next leap is yet to happen. Supermind has to come. And he says it's a given conclusion. It is going to happen. That was his, yeah.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful session, sir. It was absolutely mesmerizing. Our audience wants to hear so much more about Sri Aurobindo. But sadly, we have a very tight schedule and we are beginning the next session shortly. The audience can meet the authors outside in the authors' lounge. It was a very deeply moving exploration of the conscious and the history. We often look at revolutions as external events, wars, movements, and politics. But today, we were reminded that the truest revolution begins within. We trace the incredible arc of Sri Aurobindo's life from a firebrand nationalist to a Maharishi who mapped the future of a human evolution. A heartfelt thank you, sir, to Sri Narendra Murthy ji for sharing his deep scholarly wisdom with us, and to Dr. Reema Ahuja ji for steering this conversation with such grace and intellectual depth. Please give a huge round of applause to our distinguished guests.
And if I'm not wrong, Mr. Narendra also won a hamper in the quiz, is it not? Two.
Let's have a round of applause for that. To honor our distinguished guests, I would now like to invite Meenakshi Dua ji, a founding member of the Society for Culture and Environment, to join us on stage and present the festival memento. This memento is a tribute to devotion and transformation, themes that truly resonate with the life of the yogi we just discussed. This is the BLF 2026 memento. The legendary Padma Shri Durga Bai created this artwork especially for BLF 2026. It features a little gold raiya loved by Bangsu, transformed by the tribal god into a beautiful maiden, bringing joy to him and his struggling family. Thank you, speakers, for this enlightening session, and thank you, audience, for your rapt attention. We will see you in the next session.